Welcome to the third day of inspiration at Kinloss. I'd like to welcome all participants. I would like to welcome all presenters. I would particularly like to welcome the shared grandparents of my grandson, Rav Reuven and Rabbanit Shani Targan, and also Rabbi Andrew Shaw, who with the Mizrahi team and with the support of Rav Perez has done so much to take one day of 17 sessions into a weekend where 4,000 people have the opportunity to learn Torah together. An amazing accomplishment. Last week I was on the Chief Rabbi's mission to the graves of the great tzaddikim, the Gedolei Yisrael, who were buried in Ashkenaz. And one of the early graves we visited was certainly a religious hero and inspiration to everyone on the group, and that was Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, lived 1808 to 1888 and is buried in Frankfurt. His matzeva, quite plain, not ornate, stands different and distinct from almost every other stone we have seen. Every other stone ends with the acronym Taf Nun Tzadik Bet Hey Tien Nafsho Tzrura B'Tzrura Chayim, but written boldly at the foot of his grave, his matzeva, is just Nafsho Tzrura B'Tzrur HaChayim. It is possible for a sage on a certain level, for someone to attain Torah of such a level that one can say their soul is already bound up with the lives of those who live eternally in the next world, but also so much in ours. At the beginning of our parsha this week, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch looks at the use of the word emor rather than diber, when it says, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, emor el ha-kohanim b'nei Aaron, va'amarta aleihem l'nefesh lo yitma ba'amav. And he explains that daber is different from amirah. Daber is a short term. It's a word that's used for a general principle, but amirah is to be expansive, with all the details brought to havanat halev, internalized, full comprehension. He says, alone, one can be daber, but it can't be understood. One cannot be lomar alone. To be part of an amirah is to be part of a tradition of transmission. And he says there's a distinction between the Tanaim, those who taught just what they had heard as they had heard it, and the Amoraim, those who interpreted and embellished and expanded to explain the mitzvot. He explains that the strange order of Emor El HaKohanim B'nei Aharon is to instruct the children of Aaron that they should not only know that they have a responsibility to pass on the tradition, but also that they have a responsibility to pass on this idea that they are the B'nei Aharon, that they are part of a chain of transmission. And with that, he says, they need to be engaged in a process of chinuch, of education and indoctrination, incorporation into the transmission of their particular minhagim, their halachot, their mitzvot. They needed to experience the induction of the chinuch, of internalizing in their heart. And on the word ba'amav, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch notes that the entirety of Israel are required to bury the dead. A kohen is distinct and has his own responsibilities. However, in the event that there is a dead body that he finds, which is not part of anyone's particular doesn't belong to any tribe or any town, and he finds a mitzvah, he says, even the Kohen HaGadol, who is a Nazir on the way to slaughter his Korban Pesach, or his Korban for Pesach Sheni it would be today, and perform Milah on his son, even with all those mitzvot that he's looking to do, he must interrupt his mitzvah-laden journey to bury the unclaimed body. He says, we learn from this the extra value of Gemilut Chasadim towards the dead. and says directly, this is the direct line of the living Torah of Judaism, Shematarat hamatarot shel haTorah azot, that the arch principle of this our Torah, lechanech et ha'adam, is to educate a person, lehiyot adam, into being a person, a mensch into being a mensch. The purpose of Torah is to turn us into better human beings. One of the greatest graves, one of the oldest graves we visited was the kever of the Maharam of Rothenburg. Lived 1220 to 1293. He wasn't buried at the time of his passing, as people will know from the famous story. He refused the ransom demanded by his captors for 7 years because he did not want people to give money to the people who held him because it would lead to more ransoms, and he died. He died incarcerated. It was only 14 years later that Alexander Susskind paid a ransom for his burial and the return of his remains in order that he could be buried with dignity. And Alexander Susskind is buried adjacent to the Maharam. During the 7 years of incarceration, the Maharam had visitors who came to him with Sheilot and Tshuvot, for Tshuvot, and he apologized that he didn't have the books or the wherewithal to answer, but answered as best he could. And we have the records of some of those Tshuvot he gave in incarceration, one of which deals with the idea of Aliyat Eretz Yisrael. And he says, by and large, Aliyah is a really good thing. He's in favor of the concept, but he says the land of Israel is different from every other land, as we read yesterday, and he cites it. It is a land which has the capacity to vomit us out if we sin. So while every mitzvah outside Israel doesn't count as much, says the Ramban, as a mitzvah performed in Israel, on the other hand, says the Maharam, in the event that you are, or if you have a propensity to be an avaryan, if you have the tendency to sin, it's better to sin in Chutz La'aretz than to defile the land, which you do, or risk having it vomit you out. Be careful of Israel, he says, because we want it to be maintained as pure. It isn't a place, he says, for Kadosh Rosh. It's a place of Tahara, of purity. A different line towards Israel comes from the Sfat Emet, the grandson of the first Rebbe of Gur, the third Ger Rebbe. And the Sfat Emet comments on the idea that anyone who doesn't see Jerusalem rebuilt is as if he contributes to its destruction. So Yerushalmi, Kol Dor, any generation, she'eino nivneh biyamav, doesn't have it built in its day, ma'alin alav, is treated ke'ilu hu hechrivo. It's treated as if he is part of the destruction of the temple of Israel. What on earth can it mean to destroy something which has not yet been built? And surely if you're there and it's built and you don't support it, you can count as one of its destructors. But to be away from it, and he explains, within every generation lies the capacity to restore the temple to Israel. Within every generation lies the capacity to rebuild the temple. And any generation that doesn't seize the opportunity to rebuild the temple, that generation is destroying an opportunity, and that generation will count as one of those that failed in our spiritual purpose. Today, we are builders. Today, our material is the Torah of Israel. Today, our tools are the power of Amirah, the narration of Torah ideas, and the capacity of Shemiyah, our ability to listen, Hamevi lidei havanat halev, to bring these ideas into the understanding of our heart. It's our material and our tools. Our goal today is to build a palace of Hashem for us and for all generations. And so with these words, I welcome you to our third day of inspiration here at Kinloss. I thank the World Zionist Organization and Mizrahi who have joined as partners, particularly the work of Mizrahi in putting together the program and shepherding us from a few presenters to the wonderful weekend that we are celebrating, and in joining us with Israel, its scholars, its inspiration, so that we may share in building a homeland for God and a greater palace of Torah. Welcome all.